Cost of Victory, Book 1 of the Unseen Scar series by C.R. Saxon. Chapter 9. We have to talk about this. John grabbed Ferdinand's arm, stopping his escape. Squirming, Ferdinand fought to break free. There's nothing to talk about. You're supposed to put on weight. You've been eating everything, haven't you? Accusing the gent wasn't John's first choice, but why else was he failing in his task again? I eat it. Ferdinand broke free, cradling his arm. Then what's going on? You know I have to report to the superintendent. I have till the end of break. Ferdinand flinched away from something John couldn't see. If you'd leave me alone, I'd be fine. No, you won't. Turning away, Ferdinand headed toward the boats. Don't ignore me. With this, it doesn't look like you've kept your part. You'll be sent home. I've told you how many times? Ferdinand turned a glare on him. Your food's disgusting. It makes me sick. How can I gain weight when you keep making me sick? He meant that literally? I'm tired. Hurrying away, Ferdinand grabbed a boat and pushed off. Great. Now what do I do? Catching their breaths, they continued laying on the soft grass. Running was the only respite Ferdinand had. But racing Oya, then their battles. The voice mocked him for smiling before he realized his lips had curled up. Forcing his face back to neutral, Ferdinand focused on the fluffy clouds. There was something about the perfect sky which made his little island feel safer, more isolated and protected. Not even a breeze intruded upon them. The silence was strangely comfortable. This wasn't something Ferdinand was used to. Not the quiet. That never bothered him, despite making those around him uncomfortable. But Oya, she seemed to enjoy this as much as him. Telling me which ancient languages you're willing to translate will narrow down the options immensely. Oya sat up and activated her little cube. Soon enough, twisted notes danced around them, somehow bringing a wonderful sense of calm. You don't have to divulge all you know. But a couple, or your science people will be spending the next 4 lifetimes trying to choose. Now say all that in common. Sitting up, Ferdinand grinned, rubbing his complaining stomach. How do I get out of John's food tonight? I common start specking now about how? She tried. How about I start speaking common now? He waited for her to say it properly. You have all the words well enough, but I don't know how to teach you order in a way you'll understand. Not fault my you out order spec of. It isn't my fault you speak out of order. She rolled her eyes and repeated it before choosing a new song. Despite the smarminess of her attitude, a smile grew on his face. The voice said nothing, so Ferdinand berated himself. He knew he had no right to any of this. Expecting anything wasn't fair to her. Once she had the language down, something cold and hard rested on his chest. This will all end. He swallowed hard. Of course it would end. He wouldn't be needed anymore, and she could continue on with her life. This was just another job. Only, his client was kinder than he was used to. It seems that way because Ondo has no set order. Common does. Do you know how odd it is for me, saying words in the order of importance at the time? What's so strange? Why wouldn't the most important words be placed first? It's silly wasting time with words that aren't necessary at the moment. Leaves no room for misinterpretation either. Hands on her hips, Oya switched to her own tongue for ease of conversation. When his grin grew, she giggled and squeezed his hand. A perfect void. That was the only way to describe the girl who abducted him and dragged him across the entire hospital. That void didn't vanish until she pushed him into a darkened room. What does she want? Lights flicked on, and Ferdinand was facing a boy not much older than himself. The child was horribly ill and asphyxiating. Rushing forward, the tinkerer ignored the burning fire of the boy and rolled him to the side. When Ferdinand recognized what he was seeing, anger filled him. Calling healers was pointless. Die alone and not bother anyone. This is why the boy was left here. The least important. A shaky smile hid how much that memory turned his stomach. I'm sorry, most languages don't work that way. Leaving that one be, Oya continued on. Well, which ones? I can order them by language and you can choose, or you could. They're on that fancy glass of yours now. They are called screens. You know that. Another song started, but something was missing. It was right there. He could almost see it, and it had nothing to do with the calm that strange music brought to him. No, it was something else. I do. She stuck her tongue out at him and laughed a little too enthusiastically. How many do you think they could handle choosing from? Good question. I'll randomize them and give each person 20? Yes, 20. They should be able to pick from that many. If not, they can request another set. The voice. Sounds like a good idea to me. Less than 3 hours of music should be doable for any person. Ferdinand hesitated, but continued on. Most of the songs, I can't figure out what instruments they're playing. Giggles escaped Oya. Of course you wouldn't. And why's that? He had to know. Reaching over, Ferdinand paused the music. They don't exist anymore. That whole proper nonsense. Nothing's less proper than you. But you know what they are? I do. Exotic green eyes turned to the evening sky. And, if it were possible, she managed a Cheshire smirk. Those instruments don't exist anymore. The most commonly used you'll never find is one called a guitar. Mostly they'll be electric guitars. It was the rage for centuries. Electric guitar. What's that? Stupid child. Laughter filled the air. Oya restarted the music, then went to work scouring the cube. Guitars were instruments with 6 strings, and were strummed with the fingers, no bow. Turning all stringed instruments electric was the fad for a while. Even some of the ones we still have today, like mandolins, violins, harps, kyoikus, pululus, vinas, and so on. Leaning in, Ferdinand looked at the picture Oya pulled up. How do you electrify a huluhu? More giggles danced between them. There are instructions on the cube, though I'm more than certain you'd figure it out. Blushing, Ferdinand changed gears, making a mental note to look into these electric instruments. When do you want me to announce you? There's nothing I can do till they return from this crazy long break, so let's wait till then. A laugh came up unbidden. You are the mean one, aren't you? Don't say that to the person who so graciously offered to help, especially since you're all more than capable of doing this yourself. Her tongue shot out again, and she jumped to her feet, glittering. I'll be right back. Unnatural tones swirled around him. Closing his eyes, Ferdinand laid back onto the soft grass. The voice scratched at the back of his mind, but... When she returned, Oya was carrying a decent-sized rectangular box. Bony hands moved across it when she placed it in his lap. Intricately carved flowers decorated the oak's surface, dispersed between flowing swirls and eddies, depicting a moving river. The design was reminiscent of artwork popular in Oishi a century ago. It was beautiful. After properly admiring the box, he lifted the lid, revealing a violin. An impossibly distinct violin. Where did you get this? Do you like it? She rocked on her feet. Where did you get this? He repeated a second time with less awe and more ire. At his attitude, she folded her arms and pouted her lips. I asked for it. Do you know what this is? Ferdinand turned it over with utmost care. Slowly his hands explored every inch of the beautiful instrument, taking in its very essence. A violin. Her tone reminded him it was a pretty common thing. Yes, but... No, this is a Weiyuan. Is that a cousin to the violin? She asked, confused at his astonishment. She's a luthier, or she was. These were worth a small fortune when she was alive, and she didn't make many. I'm sorry, was she someone important to you? She lived when my great-grandmother was young. I don't understand the problem. Squatting down, Oya peered at the instrument. Disbelief filled him. How can she not? I'm sorry if it isn't worth much. I thought it'd be good for you to have an outlet you didn't have to hide. What? She wasn't making any sense. You work hard. Once in a while we come here and run and fight, but we can't come here whenever you want. I heard you're always sick. I thought if you focused your energy into something you could keep with you, you might not be sick as often. What makes you... Do I really want to know the answer? Burning red head to toe, he continued on. This is a rare treasure. Thank you very much. But why a violin? Sadness touched her eyes. The violin is the most versatile instrument. It can scream and laugh, cry and sing. It can be your voice when silence is required. And it's portable. Blushing deeper, he looked away. She was serious, and completely sincere. Even her normal half-crazed look was absent when she spoke those words. Why? Why would she care this much? Why is she being nice? She was there at the hospital. How can she not realize what I am? I don't understand. I don't understand. What makes you think I need such a voice? There are things I can't do either. This leaves us with a choice. Either we find an alternative, she poked him right above the heart, or we let it eat away at us. What can't you do? Seems she can do anything. I wonder. Oya winked, madness touching her eyes once again. Knowing this was all he was going to get, he changed the subject. Do you play? Are you going to teach me? No, I've no talent for such things, but learning seems to be a gift of yours. She lifted the bow from the case and handed it to him. She then showed him how to access sheet music stored on the cube. There was a veritable library to choose from. What's the problem with the violin? I'm not worthy of an instrument of this caliber. The best violinist in the world would feel humbled holding this. Wow, rich people are weird. It's an instrument. I'm glad it's a nice one. But what good is it if people are afraid to touch it? Isn't it better for a novice to make horrid sounds on it than for it to sit and collect dust? Stunned, Ferdinand looked at her. That's a view I've never heard before. How happy would you be if you only took on work at your level? I know you're more amazing than you let on. There can't be much out there. You'd sit around wasting your days waiting for a suitable challenge. This wasn't something he wanted to acknowledge, so Ferdinand remained silent. Screams caught Theon's attention as he prepared for class. Heaving a sigh, he leaned back, hovering in the middle of his room. Again? I guess I have no choice. Ferdinand spent as many nights in the suite as he did before his 3-month vacation. That left Theon and Zephyr. Getting into his suite mate's room wasn't a problem for an energist. Tripping a latch was child's play. Waking the prince, however, was anything but. When he finally succeeded, Zephyr swung, giving him a black eye. This was a gift Theon would have returned, but the fighter wasn't actually awake. Neither was he coherent. With no other choice, the energist dragged him out to Healer Bear's office in isolation, the main medical facility for the islands. He could have taken Zephyr to one of the little clinics scattered throughout the islands, but this was something the head healer needed to take care of. Seeing the prince like this scared Theon. What's wrong with him? His mind's exhausted, and he wasn't able to answer any of my questions. Doesn't look like he's slept in over a week. I put him to sleep and we're monitoring him. Healer Bear looked confused at the screen in his hands. Will he be able to travel home for break? A jolt of pain hit. Theon took in a sharp breath. Possibly. You said earlier he's having nightmares? Bear asked. Flying around during a serious conversation was rude, unfortunately. The chairs were uncomfortable, so Theon hovered just barely above the seat. Yes, he wakes up multiple times a night screaming. Does his cousin know? He's always the first one in there, Theon lied. I can't also deal with that child right now. Thank you for bringing him. I'm sure Lord Ferdinand appreciates it. Ferdinand didn't ask me to bring him. Really? He was gone when Zephyr started screaming. I see. Concern wrinkled the perfectly average man's brow. Anything else I should know? Not that I can think of. Nodding, the healer jumped topics. How are you doing? Your recovery? Better. The energist's eyes drifted toward the window. That medicine you offered is working faster than the healing sessions, but I still get jolts of pain. Healer Bear pulled up a new box on the screen and recorded Theon's answer. Anything else before offering it campus-wide? No, sir. Honestly, it's a miracle in a shot. After a short meeting with the other scientists, Ferdinand left as quickly as he could. 15 minutes were spent answering questions. Were my instructions really so difficult? Pick a song out of 20 and don't share the music or what we're doing with anyone. Don't blame them when it's your fault. If he could, he'd turn the music on, but it was time for his pupil. Ferdinand prepared mentally to give his full attention to his mentee, or as much as the voice didn't command. As always, the 6-year-old was well prepared. The child knew what each piece of lab equipment was for and how they worked. He fixed the broken ones as well. This is magnificent, Lord Elbarat. You worked hard while I was gone. You've finished introductory training and are ready for the next phase, Ferdinand announced proudly. Guilt hit him hard. The only reason his pupil wasn't hurt was because the child didn't have anyone off the islands to lose. At least Elby's okay. Multiple times his mentee asked him to use the name Elby, but the skeleton couldn't bring himself to say the nickname out loud. Twisted freak. Really? But... Trailing off, Elby ran a hand through his dark, shiny hair as mismatched eyes darted around the room. It took a moment, but one gray eye and one green eye returned to his mentor's gaze. But what? You said you'd teach me your inventions after I completed the standard equipment. I did say that, didn't I? Ferdinand sighed. He fetched one of the medical discs from a nearby table. You've finished all of your coursework? There's still a few days left in the block, but I have to know before I give this to you. I only have one thing left. I'll finish after our session. Elby answered, excited that his hard work and productivity finally turned in his favor. What a cruel joke you're playing. Hesitantly, Ferdinand placed the disc in front of his student. Lord Elbarat, you are not to start on this until you've finished your last assignment. Do you understand? If you do, I'll take it back and not give you another chance. Elby looked at him in horror. Yes, sir. I understand the consequences. Good. He sat on the table and looked down at Elby. I'll teach you everything about this device as soon as you figure out where I started when I assembled the circuit board. You've shown greater proficiency in understanding circuitry layout and design than other students. This will allow you to realize something important. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Confidence and excitement shone in Elby's mismatched eyes. Removing his hand from the disc, Ferdinand allowed his mentee to take it. This is the end of your sessions for the block. Before I let you go, I have some ground rules. You can utilize any source you wish, except for me. You're a useless source anyway. Huh? May I ask why? When making something new, there's no expert to ask. You figure it out from experts in other areas and help from your peers. Studies and information on similar things are priceless commodities. You'll figure this out in the same manner it'll take to develop your own equipment. That makes sense. You'll not step foot in this lab till you have the answer for me. This made the young tinkerer a little nervous. How about the other labs? Those are fine, but my lab doesn't exist the moment you walk out the door. Yes, sir. Ferdinand's expression softened, becoming friendly again. Go finish your work. I look forward to seeing your answer. Sadistic jerk. Thank you, sir. Elby jumped off his chair and ran for the door, excited to do what he'd been waiting almost a year for. Before stepping out, concern filled him. The 6-year-old looked back, hesitant to leave. He wanted this, but giving up his mentor? A gentle, reassuring smile from Ferdinand gave him the courage he needed to take that final step out of the lab. Enjoy crushing his dreams. The moment Elby left, Ferdinand slipped a small speaker inside his ear and started the music. A gray cloud hung heavy over him. He had nothing left to do. He'd perfected the second skin while at the hospital in South Chuzo. Even if the superintendent hadn't insisted this count as his final project, he didn't have time to order what he needed for something new. So he fiddled with the device, testing and tweaking it. He was nervous and couldn't stop. Not having anything to do, the thought made his insides shake. The agony of nothing occupying him, and John's food, was wreaking havoc on his stomach. As soon as this was turned in, a screen chimed and he leapt for it, hoping desperately for a new request, something to work on, anything. Playing with Oya lessened his need to always be doing something, but only to a small degree. This project was the last thing he had. However, the message was from the Duchess, his mother. Disappointment at a missed opportunity filled him. About this time his door opened. There weren't many people with access to his lab. John, Elby, and Oya somehow. That was about it. Though all adults had authority to override his security protocols. He was about to greet whoever it was when his eyes hit the reason for the message. What's wrong? You look worried. His ally's voice overcame the music to strike his ears. Don't be ridiculous. Before John's eyes, Ferdinand's expression of fright and concern changed to boredom. What are you reading? My family summoning me home for an event honoring my aunt. The Queen or the General? The General. Ah, what for? I haven't gotten that far. I'm sure it has something to do with military service. Probably her work distributing medicine and cleaning up East. Ferdinand swallowed hard against the lump in his throat as a new song started. Azute. Oh yeah, Samuel said something about that. Apparently her troops cleared thousands of victims. She dug many of the graves herself. Ferdinand scowled at his own words and John's callous tone. This is a world recognition thing? John pushed on, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. Close enough. There are a number of people being recognized for their efforts in helping the affected areas. From what I know, every ruling body was invited. Somehow, it felt as if the music in his ear made this conversation easier. Wow, sounds like an official party. Have fun with that. Thanks, Ferdinand answered, annoyed. Here's dinner. You better eat it all. John moved aside the screen to place a plate in front of him. I have some work I need to finish up, so I can't babysit you tonight. Ferdinand looked at the screen John just moved, completely ignoring the food. I'm more than capable of feeding myself. It's not your ability I question. Get your work done. I don't know why you didn't finish before we got back. John frowned. Not all of us are workaholics. Ignoring the dinta, Ferdinand grabbed the screen he'd transferred all the cube's contents to. Holding this treasure in his hands, it wasn't every time, but often enough it felt like someone was pleading to him, begging him to read and learn and remember. What am I supposed to remember? What have I forgotten? He could almost hear light giggles. It had nothing to do with what he'd forgotten, just that it wanted to be remembered. He wasn't sure how long he stared at the endless files before his conversation with Oya floated through his head. The electric instruments. I'll focus on that. Looking through, he found the information he needed in a language he recognized. What an intriguing concept, even if it was a bit odd to consider. Either way, he could put his full attention into learning about these. Here, Zhao handed Norger a tissue. Taking it, Norger calmed himself enough to get his voice under control. I don't know how you do it. Do what? Check in with all the scientists affected by the plague weekly. That's what Master Luce is for. Maybe, but I'm the science's lead. Being nosy is my responsibility, and my right. Got to make sure my underlings are doing well, or getting better at least. Zhao gave a goofy grin, making his younger peer smile. But who do you talk to? Norger turned to the window, pressing his fist against a sharp pain in his gut. Master Luce, at least once a week. I also have my own confidants, so don't worry. Zhao lied. Bothering others about such things? Of course he was sad. What a Zootite wasn't. But still, how are you all right? Bringing the tissue to his face, Norger let it soak in more tears. Only Norger could look impossibly handsome, despite an hour of crying. Well, I'm pretty lucky. For how many people have no one left? I have 2. Because my mom's still alive, I don't have to rush home and figure out how to pick up a devastated country. Turning away, Zhao grimaced at his own jolt of pain. This isn't how I pictured my life, but I got off easier than most. I stay focused on how grateful I am for that. You're way too well adjusted, Norger shook his head. Tell me about it. The science lead smiled and escorted his subordinate out of his lab, watching as Norger walked down to the boats. Wait. The exhausted boy stopped, but didn't turn until Zhao was at his side. Let's take the bridge. Zhao walked Norger to the main island before returning to his lab. Turning off the lights left the room cold and dim, exactly how Zhao wanted. He was alone now. There was no one near enough to see him, to hear him. Looking around, he wished for the first time he was a tinkerer. Ferdinand's lab has all sorts of things to smash. Trembling, his own tears fighting to come, Zhao pounded on the closest table. His hands hurt, but he kept going. Why? Dropping to his knees, he shifted to hide under the table he'd beaten. The anger, the sorrow, the uncertainty. This was never his to deal with. Now it was his new reality, and Zhao was powerless to do anything about it. It all boiled and grew, filling him to bursting until he expelled it in a desperate scream. Back in his own lab, John pulled up his screen and went back to writing. He didn't accomplish much before the eerie feeling of being watched overcame him. An investigation showed no one was there. Turning back to his workstation, John nearly jumped out of his skin. Hoya, announce yourself next time. I'm sorry. No matter how difficult she was, John had no right to yell at a girl. Toying with the chain around her neck, Oya handed her screen to him. Tell me about the violin. Startled, he took it to see what she said. The one you asked for? Wasn't it up to your standard? According to Ferdinand, it's the best out there. What else would you expect? Any that plays. Why such a top-shelf instrument? Oya leaned forward until her nose almost touched his. Pulling away, John grabbed a chair for her, adjusting it to sit as high as possible. It was repayment. Ignoring the chair, Oya blinked at him. Repayment for what? I don't know what you did, but Ferdinand couldn't move on his own. 2 days later he was up and working again. You made him better. The least I could do is fulfill your request to the same degree. I wasn't keeping score. Oya sat on the table staring intensely down at John, causing him to waver. Amused, but annoyed, she broke eye contact so he could read her words. I didn't think you were. John looked at her earnestly. It was my way of saying thank you. Her face softened. Thank you. For what? For understanding his value better than he does. Oya moved to sit cross-legged on his work table. Initially, Oya hadn't believed a society that worshipped women existed, but the more she talked to John, the more she saw it. He always placed himself so he was looking up at her, always gave her his full attention. He'd even let a couple projects get ruined because he wouldn't turn his focus from her until she left. There was no prostrating or wailing. It was the subtle things he did to show respect. Amusingly, he was more respectful and submissive to other girls than he was to her. This indicated he wasn't certain about her, which was Oya's preference. Still, those little things added up. She now made sure he wasn't working on anything needing his attention before interrupting. Is there anything else I can help you with? John asked uncertainly. There is. I heard you two talking. What does it mean he's being summoned home? Confusion twisted John's face. He's been called home to honor his aunt and attend an event held for her and others. They did wonderful things recently and deserve recognition. Who else will be there? Representatives from all 18 countries. I'm sure at least one of my brothers will be sent. Wow, sounds big. It is, John grinned, looking up at her. It'll take the entire break? As far as Ferdinand's concerned, he'll be sent to Chuzo's capital with his oldest sister. He'll probably spend a couple weeks at the palace coordinating and preparing for traveling allies. The celebration will take a week. Then he, Zafir, and any other students in attendance will travel back to the islands. Oya frowned at that information. I'm sorry, but I doubt you'll be invited. Huh? No. She waved a delicate hand around nonchalantly. That's not an event I belong at. Then what's wrong? The palace. His cousin will be there? Where else would a prince be? I shouldn't release him from his punishment till after the break, then. Ferdinand shouldn't go there. It isn't for us to decide, John responded, taken aback. I see. Bringing a finger to her lip, the wheels in Oya's head turned as she looked for a solution. Why? Why shouldn't he go to the palace? It's a second home for him. You've known him your whole life and you haven't realized? Oya let her disappointment rain down on John. It made him visibly quiver. What good is an ally who lives within arm's reach if you don't even try? I'm sorry, but what did I do wrong? It wasn't just fear filling those chocolate brown eyes. Regret sighed out of Oya, but this wasn't a problem. Reaching out a hand, she did what she'd done dozens of times to random people on the islands. Stopping the formation of a memory was easy. She didn't even have to delve deep. This was probably the most useful thing she'd learned about the mind. A gentle swipe and everything after she said, "I see," was gone. For a moment John sat frozen. Then he blinked. Why? Why shouldn't he go to the palace? It's a second home for him. That's something you'll have to learn for yourself. A hint of lunacy shone through her wink.